Three True Horror Stories of Skinwalkers and Cryptids, Scary Stories Part 2. Welcome all to another Too Scared to Sleep. Tonight, join me as we dive into the unknown world with another 3 true horror stories of Skinwalkers and Cryptids. About 5 years ago, when I was 15, I would frequently walk home from school with a few friends. Through a wooded area, which was on a steep hill. We had spent some time in the neighborhood exploring it, as we had been walking that way since we were all 13. Next to the forest there was a field with a wire fence around 2 sides of it, blocking off the forest. The fence had a human-sized hole in it, which we explored a few months before, that led through bushes to what we believed was an abandoned homeless person's camp, complete with a poorly built shelter made out of tarps and crates, a few plastic chairs, and a small pit in the middle. We'd gone there a few times to show people around, and I'd always stayed in the same area, with the exception that the chairs would occasionally move positions and be pushed into the bushes. We visited this location but never saw anyone. To get to our houses, we had to go through the fields to the forest, then up the steep slope to the top, where the houses are located. It was late spring, and a group of friends and I were strolling home from school as usual. It was a beautiful day, so rather than returning home, we decided to go for a walk in the woods. We walked through the bushes for a while, maybe an hour or more, looking for other trails or open spots. We walked through a bush and discovered we had walked into the homeless person's camp area by accident. We were all surprised because we'd never seen it from this angle before, only through the fence, but something didn't feel right, like a sinking feeling. That feeling was not shared by my friends. After a long day of walking, one of them decided to relax in one of the plastic chairs and eat some of the food he'd brought with him. While my other friend and I simply walked around the camp, we entered into the covered bed to see if anything had changed, and immediately detected a foul smell. But I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. One of my friends assumed it was a dead body, and went inside to investigate further, while I returned to the outside to chat with the other. My friend was gone for a few minutes before calling for us to come see what he had discovered. We turned down the offer. So, he came out irritated, calling us names, and pulling out his phone to show us photographs of a dead rat. The rat appeared to be rotting and mutilated. He claimed to discover it in the back corner, but we found it creepy and decided to leave it alone. I wanted to walk around the forest by slipping through the fence, but the other 2 said it would take too long, and that we should simply go up the hill through the trees so that they may all go home. I chose to join them. I didn't want to go home alone. So, with that feeling, we went back the way we came, and my friends were simply fooling around, trying not to worry about the rat, when we didn't notice that one of our friends fell behind. As we were walking through, the friend that stayed behind kept insisting he saw something, but we simply laughed at him, telling him he was seeing things, and that he was positive he saw something, and that he was beginning to sound anxious. The friend that was still up with me jokingly shouted something along the lines of, "If you're here to kill us, do it already. My leg hurts." And we had a decent laugh, until my friend Jason at the bottom started having a full-on panic attack and began to cry. We went over to see how he was doing. That's when I noticed something a few meters away, an old black figure hiding behind a tree. But it wasn't a person dressed entirely in black. It was pitch black. I imagined it as an elongated figure grasping onto the tree, with long, wide fingers. I briefly mistook it for a shadow or something, but it was clear that it was 3D. I stood there for a few seconds staring at it, and it didn't move. I felt like a deer caught in headlights, until my other friend Manny began shouting about whatever it was, but I still didn't move. Manny was the one who dragged us. He was crying uncontrollably. We had gotten far enough away that we decided to turn around and run and hide. I couldn't run for very long. I turned around, feeling as if all my energy had been taken from me, and the creature had barely moved. We continued, leaning more against the tree, its long, thin arms by its side. We were out of breath, but attempted to jog. We fell to the ground from exhaustion as we walked to the road at the top of the hill, staring at the forest. I believe Manny began filming the forest and shouting something, but I can't remember what it was, and nothing came after us. We returned home, making sure to stay on the main roads. Even though we had school the next day, my friends and I decided to stay at my house and talk and draw pictures of what we saw. We told my mother, and she didn't exactly believe us, but she promised to drop us off at school and pick us up the next day to make us feel better. We spoke about it with friends, but they just blew us off, as if we were making something up. We searched through the video footage but found nothing. We'd all claimed to have seen it again, but we couldn't prove it because it was never as clear as the first time. Despite seeing it from car windows while driving there, or while walking to the shop by the field after school, my friends and I have never returned to that forest. I don't believe Manny has returned to the forest, but I haven't spoken to them since high school. But that long black figure always stayed in my mind. It still bothers me when I walk home in the dark. I live in a small town called Bundaberg in southeast Queensland, Australia. It's a small farming town on the coast, and the property we're on is surrounded by cane paddocks for the majority of the year, unless they've been harvested, which they are right now. I haven't always lived in this house. I spent my entire life with my mother, along with my 2 brothers and 2 sisters. My older brother, on the other hand, lived with our grandparents and has been on the property for about 15 years. Of course, I'd come and gone over the years, but I'd never seen anything like this. Grandpa's the custodian and prince of the Darabellum, the area's first people, and the land we're on is sacred and belongs to us through a native title that Grandpa won many years ago. Grandpa was born on the Burnett River, which runs through the back of the property. Anyway, you have the Sasquatch of the Americas, and I'm sure people have heard of the Yowie, or the Australian Bigfoot, also known as Quinkin. But these are the big guys, the gigantic creatures commonly known as hairy men. They also have a different type that we call June Judy, which are the small ones that grow no taller than 5 feet. My older brother used to tell me a story about how a whole group used to hang out right where I'm sleeping, which is a shed that's been done up about 30 meters or so from the house. But before there were sheds, there was a big bushy wild orange tree right here. And this was a well-kept yard with plenty of space. When you're sitting in the lounge room, you can see me walking up from the shed through the sliding glass door. They apparently used to hang out some nights, usually in the early hours of the morning, and even sleep under the orange tree when it was there. And as my brother and grandfather pointed out, you could see them clearly from the lounge room or a bedroom window, but all the bedroom windows were on that one side of the house, and apparently they just ignored them until late at night when they started messing around with my brother and cousins. They would occasionally tap and peer through the windows, among other things. My brother was sleeping in his bedroom one night, and one of our cousins was in there as well. They were only 13 years old at the time. They slept with the window open to let in some fresh air. Our cousins wake up and notice this thing moving around in the room and looking at them, and all he does is scream and cower in the corner. My brother walks up and runs out of the room and down the hallway, screaming for Nana and Grandpa. And then it leaps out of the window, knocking things from the drawers, and runs off into the paddock. Grandpa went out the next day and chopped down the orange tree, so I guess he gave him a chance. But once they've done that, it was time to move on. They made themselves scarce. I was about 15 or 16 years old, and I was walking home from a friend's house around 2 or 3 a.m. with the friend I was living with at the time. As we walked home, my friend was pushing a BMX, and we were just talking and laughing. We were driving down the road when we noticed what appeared to be 2 very large greyhounds jump over a set of mailboxes at some flats and land in the middle of the road. These mailboxes appeared to be 1.5 meters tall and 5 to 6 meters away from the road. I thought it was strange at the time, but I kept watching them. What I saw was something I'll never forget in my entire life. The 2 greyhounds appeared to stand up on their hind legs and morph into a much bigger and beefier being, which I can only describe as looking like a Yowie, which I guess is the equivalent of a Sasquatch to our friends from America and other countries. These Yowie both ran around the corner about 200 meters in the direction we came, and we both sat there dumbfounded. A few seconds later, we heard what sounded like a small female child screaming terror. Keeping in mind that it was around 3 a.m. and there were no children out, we both stared at each other in horror, not saying anything, and I jumped on the bike's handlebars, and he pedaled that bike non-stop all the way home, which was about 2 kilometers away. We locked the doors when we got home. We had no idea what we had just witnessed, or if they had seen where we had gone. After a few minutes, I asked him to describe what he had seen, and I couldn't believe it when he described exactly what I had seen. This is most likely the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. I've only told a few people about it, and I don't think anyone believes me. They're all blaming it on drugs or alcohol. Guys, thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that bell notification if you want to listen to more. And if you want to listen to the first Skinwalkers and Cryptid story, hit the link right here in the top right corner. Till next time, Night Owls, don't be too scared to sleep.